So for my lesson, for my writing lesson, I chose create a character for first grade. And for the standards, I chose write narratives to develop real or imagined experiences or events, establish who and what the narrative will be about, include thoughts and feelings to describe experiences and events, and use a variety of words and phrases. For my objectives, they are to, before the lesson, students will be able to clearly identify the main character of a story and have a firm understanding of what a main character is. During the lesson, students will be able to use writing to describe a character that they create. And after the lesson, students will be able to explain why they chose to create the character the way they did. The materials that we will be using are create a character worksheet, coloring materials so they can color their character, a pencil so they can write, the book Know David, and a school iPad. So before learning, I would start off by telling them that we are going to be learning about main characters and how the main character is the key piece to a story, and that we will be reading Know David by David Shannon. Then the teacher will read the book to the students and then ask them after they are done reading who is the main character of the story. This will be a kind of more class discussion, so students will be sitting on the carpet and they will be able to raise their hands and answer the questions, and the teacher will call on a couple students every question. And it would be, yes, that's right, David is the main character of the story. We can tell he's the main character of the story because the story revolves around him, and he's the person we focus on during the story most of the time. And then I would say how David has many different qualities to him, and he can be described in many different ways, and then ask what are some characteristics of David. This is really just getting into how to describe a character, and then I would make a list of it on the board as students told me different characteristics that David had. Moving into the during part of the lesson, I'm not going to read this word for word, but I would explain how characters have so many different characteristics to them. There's so many different pieces of a main character, and each of them are important to the story. And also I would note that the main character is interesting, and that's what makes people want to continue reading in stories. So I would then ask what makes the main character interesting to you, and what makes you like a main character and makes you want to keep reading. Again, I would allow time for a class discussion on this, and for the kids really just get their thoughts out on why they think a main character is interesting. This will just get their thoughts flowing about what makes a main character interesting. Therefore, when they go to make their own character, they will have this in the forefront of their minds. And then I would do a little bit of the after assignment with them, but I would be creating my own character with the help from the class. So I would ask them, I would remind them importance of a character again and tell them stuff like you need to know what type of story your character is about before you create your character, because it wouldn't make sense if I wrote a story about a fish going on vacation in the woods, because fish live in the water. And while fantasy does exist and they can write stuff like a pig going to the moon, it just has to make sense for their story. So my story would be, my setting, my plot would be about a monster packing, this should say his or her, lunch for school. And so my character would need a name. I would ask for suggestions. I would say or decide on Joy as the name. And every time we pick something as a class, I would make it clear why I was picking it. So I'd pick Joy, and that makes sense because my monster is very nice and happy, and that's like the type of name or character that Joy would fit. And then stuff like who they live with and where they live is important, because if a monster lived in the mountains, it wouldn't be going to the school next to the beach. Or if she needed help making her lunch, it would be important to know who she lives with, so to see who she would call for help. And then I'd finish up describing my monster as a happy and kind monster who loves to make friends. That's more of her personality. And then she is small, purple, and fluffy. That's more of her outward appearance. So then now that the students know what creating characters is like, I would want them to start thinking about their character. I would hand out my character worksheet and I would then have them create and draw a picture. And while they are doing that, I'll be walking around and helping them. But after they're done creating their character, I would have them head to part of the class. I would have a class iPad set up where they would create a short video of themselves showing me their paper and explaining me each part of their character. This would allow me to, instead of just seeing their work on paper, it would show me or allow me to hear their thought process and really show me whether or not they understood the different concepts that go into creating a main character. So for the assessment, I would assess their video and worksheet. Exceeding expectations would be the student provides more than asked for when it comes to the characteristic traits, and they can explain why they made the choices they did for how they developed the character. Meeting expectations would be the student provides the asked for level of characteristics and explains why they chose them with some detail. And lastly, approaching expectations would be the student lacked characteristic details and they cannot explain why they chose the characteristics that they did. Sorry, I forgot to finish that sentence somehow. And for adaptation for ELL students or students with special needs, I think I would, depending on the student, it would be a little bit different, but two ways I thought of was I would ask the students to draw a picture of their character and then make a list of characteristics, such as they could just write out small, purple, fluffy, kind, excitable, likes chocolate. Like something more simple like that than what I will show down here, just so they have to list more of words. And then for my advanced or gifted students, I would challenge them to provide detail about their character more than what the worksheet asks for, such as characters and how they interact with others, what their background story is, and what, if any, what, if anything, will change for the character, like during the story, which we're not going to write a story for the character. We're just going to create the character, but in their mind, they'd have a story, I'd hope, for the character. So what would change for the character throughout the story? My citations for the standards, and then I created this create a character worksheet where they would draw their character, name the character, where does the character live, who do they live with, 5 characteristic traits. This can be personality or outward appearance wise, but I would hope and I would ask them to maybe do more things personality wise because I can see the outward appearance of their character in the drawing. And lastly, what are their characters' favorite things to do? So that is my lesson on creating a character.